line for that war. Tom?
Thank you very much, Mike Betcher, tonight in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. This is the missile that put the Iraqi Scud in its place. It is called the Patriot. It had never been tested in combat until this war in Saudi Arabia. NBC's Catherine Couric takes a look at what is now a highly effective weapon.
3 miles above Dhahran in the early morning hours, a U.S. Patriot missile meets an Iraqi Scud missile head-on.
We are the first Patriot battery in the history of the world to knock down a Scud missile.
In fact, no missile has ever been intercepted in combat.
I was shaking too long afterwards to know how I really felt.
More than 70 of the Army's Patriot missile launchers dot the desert landscape, protecting population centers and strategic military sites. Originally designed to shoot down high-performance aircraft, it's been modified to track and knock out incoming missiles. A missile like the Scud is launched. A satellite picks up the launch on its infrared sensors. It relays the information to a command post on the ground, which alerts the radar system that a missile is incoming. When the Scud is 80 miles from its target, it shows up on the Patriot's radar. When the Scud is 30 miles away, one of 4 missiles in the Patriot launcher is fired and is guided by electronic directions which enable it to strike the Scud, anywhere from just above ground level to 50,000 feet. Israel might have avoided this Scud-inflicted damage had its 2 Patriot missile batteries been operational, but it acquired them only 3 weeks ago, and it takes anywhere from 13 to 52 weeks to train those who man it. NBC News has learned that the Israelis were offered the Patriot system a year ago, but opted to continue developing their Arrow anti-missile defense system, still 5 years away. In its first test in battle, the Patriot passed with flying colors, but it may get more than one chance to prove itself. Catherine Couric, NBC News, the Pentagon.
In a moment, a discussion of today's events with 2 leading senators, both of them war veterans.
Iraq at night, and that first night attack on Baghdad.
The opening salvo of the war caught Baghdad completely off guard. All the city's lights were still on, and there was no warning, not even an air raid siren. Then it began. ABC News cameraman Fabrice Moussis used a special night vision lens to record the massive attack, which drew intense anti-aircraft fire from artillery batteries scattered on rooftops throughout the capital. Some of the airstrikes caused blinding explosions as the bombs hit their marks. Authorities were not able to achieve a complete blackout until the attack had been underway for more than half an hour. Occasionally, you could actually hear the American planes passing over the city before dropping their payloads. Incredibly, some vehicles were still moving on the roads as the attack was taking place. Terrified residents ran into the streets, seeking the protection of nearby air raid shelters. This shelter in the basement of the Al Rashid Hotel, where most foreign journalists were staying, was also used by hotel employees and their families. This round of air attacks lasted for more than 3 hours before it finally ended just before dawn. After daybreak, the city was in shock. The most visible damage we could see was to the International Telecommunications Building, where phone lines to the outside world were cut off. Yesterday afternoon, the 6-member ABC News staff left the Al Rashid Hotel and left Baghdad on this road, as seen in a recent satellite photo. Along with other journalists, we began what turned out to be a difficult and dangerous journey to the Jordanian border.
ABC News cameraman Fabrice Moussis was one of those on the trip. Fabrice, we saw a lot more than Iraqis leaving Baghdad, didn't we?
Yes, we saw some Scud missiles mounted on trucks headed for the Jordanian border. This was only 4 or 5 hours before the raid on Israel. We saw a few before the town of Radba, and again further down the road a few more. They were in small convoy with their lights off, except once in a while a small light, and there would be a few other vehicles joining them, and a little anti-aircraft light truck.
After it got dark, it got more and more dangerous on the highway toward the Jordanian border, didn't it?
Yes, I felt it was particularly dangerous because we were on a highway, and on both sides there were airfields that were being attacked, and we were very vulnerable. And one airfield, the area is called H3, past the town of Radba, was being heavily shelled by what I think were phosphorus bombs, because there were a lot there. When they would hit, you would see a succession of white lightning, and it was very intense fire.
At one point during the air attacks, we were parked on the side of the road with our headlights out, fortunately under a highway overpass, because flak from the artillery was landing on the highway only 50 yards ahead of us. We finally arrived here in the Jordanian capital 400 miles and 24 hours after we left Baghdad. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Amman.
There is more evidence today of the enormous concern and interest in the events in the Gulf. More Americans watched President Bush's speech the night before last on television, the one when he announced the beginning of hostilities, than any other event in television history. At his news conference today, President Bush sought to reassure the troops in the Gulf that the country is behind them.
Hundreds of fighters and bombers have flown more than 2,000 sorties against Iraq, against Saddam Hussein.
We're going to go out and keep doing it until we have to. He quits, he gives up. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line.
But today there were weather problems. Marine pilots said heavy clouds forced them to return to base, unable to accomplish their mission. The FA-18s refueled, bomb racks still loaded, a dangerous thing to do. The cloud cover hampered their search for Scud missiles. It also made it too difficult to evade Iraqi surface-to-air missiles.
It became questionable whether we were going to actually be able to see the ground or not, so we called an abort.
Despite all the sophisticated electronics, fighter pilots like to actually see the approaching SAM missiles, so they can outmaneuver them.
We know that those guys are there. They know that we're coming, and they are throwing a lot of lead at us.
Not all the planes, however, are affected by the cloud cover. Behind me is a Marine Corps A-6 Intruder. It is a versatile all-weather bomber designed for close air support of troops on the ground or for bombing runs deep inside Iraq. It is fully loaded and ready to go. It is loaded with deadly cluster bombs. After the repeated attacks on missile batteries and power plants, Marine pilots say they are now going after ground troops, Saddam Hussein's elite Republican Guards.
These are good troops. You know, they're not going to scare that easily, but I think definitely if you look at a sustained around-the-clock bombing campaign against them, it's going to get to them.
And pilots say already the Iraqi anti-aircraft fire is becoming disorganized.
We've hurt them as far as their ability to communicate and to control their air defense system.
This kind of surprised me. I figured that they'd be firing a lot more than they are. They are firing a lot, just not where I was.
Peter, the pilots tell me that despite the bad weather and despite their inability to locate all the Scud missiles, they still consider their bombing campaign on schedule and on target.
And we keep hearing, Jim, from the military high command that they're under very tight control to stay away from civilian targets or anywhere where civilians might be. Is that the sense you get from pilots too?
Yes, that is the sense, Peter. They tell me that they are being very exacting in their bombing runs, very precise. And that's another reason why many of them return today rather than seek out targets of opportunity. That's not their mission, not their job. They have specific targets, and if they can't find them, they come home with their bombs still loaded.
That's the point I was wondering if you're going to make. Thanks very much, Jim Hickey in Saudi Arabia tonight. If the reports from the field turn out to be accurate, the pilots flying for the Western Alliance have managed to hit a large percentage of their targets, not necessarily destroy, but hit. The Pentagon is clearly pleased. As ABC's Bob Zelnick reports, a lot of new, expensive new weapons systems have apparently been performing very well.
In World War II, bomber crews used primitive bomb sights to try to hit their targets. Most of the time, they missed by up to half a mile.
Launch.
Missile away! This week, cruise missiles controlled by computers scored direct hits on 51 of the first 52 firings. Laser-guided bombs also scored direct hits. This pinpoint accuracy allows a single bomb today to do the same work as thousands of less accurate World War II weapons. One F-15E packs the military impact of an entire squadron of B-24s. Today, the U.S. began operations against Iraq from the Encirclik base in Turkey. This will allow U.S. fighters to pursue Iraqi planes that try to flee. In addition, U.S. bombers will be able to attack targets in Iraq without refueling. Sources here say the battle against Iraqi air defenses has gone so well that Allied aircraft today stepped up their attacks against Iraqi ground forces, particularly the elite Republican Guards. And for the first time in the war, Apache helicopters and A-10 Warthogs began hitting Iraqi armor. Only after Iraqi ground forces have been thinned out by airstrikes will the U.S. be ready to launch its ground campaign. Another sign that the ground war may be drawing closer was the movement of about 12,000 Marine amphibious forces into the Persian Gulf. From positions about 75 miles off the coast of Kuwait, they're expected to launch helicopter and other quick strikes against Iraqi forces in Kuwait and southern Iraq. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
Joining us this evening for a brief conversation are our two resident military analysts in Boston, former Marine General Bernard Traynor, and in Washington, Tony Cordesman. Tony Cordesman, let me ask you first, there's a kind of surreal quality to all this discussion about